Hey, Giants fans. Welcome to the latest episode of the Talk is Cheap Giants podcast from NJ Advanced Media, the Star Ledger, and NJ.com. Daryl Slater here with Bob Brookover. We're coming at you here Monday evening, December the 19th. Giants, really, literally, I'm looking at my clock 24 hours ago from right now as we're recording this. The Giants kicked off what turned out to be an absolutely enormous win for them in Washington, 20-12. They hang on and really, this was one of the biggest wins this franchise has had since they won the Super Bowl in 2011. You got to call it for what it is, and that's what it was, especially considering, worst record in the league over the last 5 years, tied with the Jets at 22-59. And here the Giants are as winter, I guess, in 2 days is starting, and in Christmas this week, and the Giants this weekend. We'll get to how, but they can clinch a spot in the playoffs in, something that I would love to see what the Vegas odds would have been for this team to make the playoffs, but preseason. But yet here they are. They're on the brink. They have an 87% chance of reaching the playoffs, according to 538. They have 8.5 wins, 1-game lead on Washington, 1.5-game lead on Seattle and Detroit. Obviously, also the tiebreaker head-to-head over Washington, so that's really a 2-game lead. We'll get to all the permutations and how they could clinch and everything, but look, just an enormous win. No matter how you slice it, we went into this game saying big time pressure, big time stage. Let's go see what type of team this Giants team is. Are they playoff worthy? And look, they're not knocking off the 72 Dolphins here. Now, we're not saying they need to be crowned as elite, but are they playoff worthy? And they were not perfect last night, but they certainly proved themselves to be a playoff worthy team, snapping out of their 1-4-1 streak. And here they are on the brink now with 3 games to play. Bob, it was certainly another heart stopper last night.
It was. They did not play the perfect game by any means. They only scored 1 offensive touchdown. They needed 2 basically goal line stops on the Commanders' last 2 possessions. They also needed some, I won't agitate. They got some fine intervention, not divine, but fine intervention from the officiating crew on that last drive. But you know what? They put themselves in a position. And let's point out, of course, the Commanders weren't happy with those calls at the end of the game. The one on the penalty for illegal formation and the pass interference. I don't know about the illegal formation one, but the other one, it was weird at least. And the other one, I thought it was definitely pass interference. Let's point out also that even if they score that touchdown, they got to get a 2-point conversion. And even to get 2-point conversion, they got to win in overtime. So, the Giants earned that win. If you're the Commanders, it's a horrible loss because you lost at home, and all those things you just stated about, it's a 1-game lead. It's really a 2-game lead. Has to be devastating for them. And we saw the euphoria in the locker room. Had to be the happiest we've seen that locker room all season last night, and for good reason.
Yeah, I mean, I think this team could they have some breathing room in the NFC playoff race a little bit here, and they could certainly exhale a little bit after the way they've played lately. They got their brains beat in by the Eagles last week when Washington was off. Everything was looking in Washington's favor coming into this game. At home, second straight game against the Giants, coming off a bye week. And yet the Giants did what they've kind of always done this year, which is make our lives a living hell at the end of games, writing these on deadline. But and I'm sure some fans too. How many of you guys have ulcers now because of this team? But also, bend but don't break. Really, I think that's been the mindset of this defense all year. It looks like, honestly, they give up a ton of yards in the fourth quarter, but they did not break ultimately. And before we get into the particulars, and you did a good job there, Bob, recapping the general nature of everything that kind of happened in the game. Here's the deal for this weekend. All right, the Giants go to Minnesota on Christmas Eve. They play at 1:00. They have 8.5 wins. Just think of it like that because they have a tie. Washington plays at 4:05 in San Francisco. Washington sitting with 7.5 wins. Seattle is in Kansas City at 1:00. Seattle's got 7 wins. And again, don't even think about the head-to-head tiebreaker with Seattle and Detroit right now. And Detroit is in Carolina. And Detroit has 7 wins. So here's it's pretty simple. The Giants can clinch by beating Minnesota, which is hard. Minnesota's really good. And then all these other things have to happen. Washington has to lose in San Francisco. I could totally see that happening. Again, that won't happen until the Giants game's over. And then Seattle has to lose in Kansas City. I think that's probably a lock. And then Detroit, who's red hot, winners of 6-7 after a 1-6 start. They have to lose in Carolina. I don't know. I mean, it's a lot that has to happen, and I think probably the hardest is the Giants winning in Minnesota. But technically, yes, the Giants can clinch. And like if they don't clinch this weekend, they have Colts at home next weekend and other things that could happen, obviously, to put them into the playoffs. And then they close in Philadelphia.
So I'll ask you this question. I'll interrupt you here and ask you
Oh,
this
yeah.
question. There's those 4 teams. Which 2 make it?
That's exactly right. So it's not like the Giants are in and the other 3 will be eliminated, right? Because the Giants right now are the 6th seed.
Right.
I think Washington will make. I have to look at all the schedules ahead.
See, I think it's going to be Detroit and the Giants.
Detroit and the Giants. Okay.
Yeah.
Detroit has a really easy schedule, right? So like let's see. Detroit has at the Panthers versus the Bears at the Packers. Okay. The Lions don't even need to win out. I think if they get to 9, there's a good chance they could get in.
Right. Yeah, I think that's
What
true.
do the Commanders have? The Commanders are Niners, Browns, Cowboys. We'll see what the Cowboys will be doing in that game. Will they be resting players?
Yeah, they very well could be because they kind of locked themselves into the 5th seed by losing yesterday. You know, they could very well beat the Eagles this week with Jalen Hurts out, but they still trail the Eagles by 2 games at that point. Pretty much, well, they do. They trail them by 2 games, and the Eagles would have to beat the Saints. If they don't beat the Saints, then the Giants could end up seeing Jalen Hurts and the Eagles' number 1 first team players in the final game of the season, which would be interesting if they don't beat the Colts and lock things up the week before. So there's still a lot of things a lot of balls in the air, things that could happen. But you
Yeah.
know, I I don't see Seattle getting to 9 wins. Well, I guess they could. They're probably gonna lose to Kansas City this week. Then they play the Jets at home, and then the Rams at home. So, yeah, I guess they could get to 9 wins still if they could beat the Jets and Rams at home. But they've been playing. They're in a hard. They're like the Giants. They won that game over the Giants, and then they went into a tailspin of their own. They've lost 4 out of 5 now. So, but if I had to make my picks, I'd pick the Lions and the Giants.
All right, yeah, I can see that, and I think we agree that Seattle is probably the least likely. And like if you go by by 538, and those numbers change a lot, Seattle actually is the least likely. They're at 30%. Lions at 41, Washington 35. Right, and then the Giants at the Giants were pregame last night 46%, and they bumped up to 87 by winning. Basically, they flip flopped with what the Commanders were, which obviously makes sense from a logical perspective. But the Jalen Hurts injury is interesting. That news came out earlier today. Obviously, they go to Dallas this weekend, and he's not going to play. Then they have Saints and versus Giants. So it's supposedly not a serious injury. And let's just say let's say he's all right. So let's say he doesn't play these next 2 weeks, and the Eagles have locked up the 1 seed. And he's healthy enough to play against the Giants. It would be really interesting to see what they do. Like,
If it's me, I have to play him some
do
at
you
least.
play him, right? Because then you're going to get another week off after that.
Right. You can't go. You know, I obviously have know the Eagles' history pretty well, and it reminds me of. Let's see if I can find the season here. I believe it was the Eagles' 2002 season. They were they were they ended up being the number 1 seed that year. So let's see if I can find this here. But but in week, they were playing the Cardinals, and Donovan. It was they went to 7-3, and Donovan McNabb broke his leg. He played the whole game on a broken leg, and then he was out basically until the playoffs. And he came back, and he was not the same Donovan McNabb that he had been in the first 10 games of the season. The Eagles, amazingly, they were 7-3 after that game, and they went 5-1 the rest of the way. In fact, they went the following week. They went out to San Francisco, was pretty good, and their backup quarterback got hurt, and uh, who came? I forget who it was that came in. AJ Feely, I think, came in, and they beat San Francisco, killed San Francisco. But when they got to the playoffs, McNabb wasn't the same. They beat the Falcons, but then lost to the Bucks, who went on to win the Super Bowl. But the point here is that you just don't want your quarterback to be out that long.
Agreed. Yeah, yeah,
You,
for
you
sure.
just you just can't have it.
So
You can't.
that's something that also could throw a, we'll see how long the Giants can go without clinching here. I mean, the bottom line is after winning last night, they're in great shape.
Let's go ahead.
When will they clinch? We'll see. Will it come? Will that game like matter a lot? Well, for what? For seeding purposes, obviously the Giants are not going to be maybe probably not resting starters unless something weird happens statistically where they're locked into a seed. Anyway, but the Jalen Hurts injury now, because of the reasons we just talked about, kind of casts a little bit of an interesting light on that finale now, I think.
So I was going to say, while we're on the subject of quarterbacks, let's talk about what you thought about what Daniel Jones did last night.
Yeah, look, I mean, he was that was a typical Daniel Jones type performance in terms of not great stats, um, but timely production and limiting turnovers, and that's what has been sort of his calling card this year. I mean, 21 of 32, 160 yards, no touchdowns, no picks, a 77.6 quarterback rating. In terms of running the ball, 10 times 35 yards, so an okay number for him. But he engineered a 10 of 12 for I believe 91 yards, right on the
Yeah,
97 yard,
on that drive and the 4th and 9 completion to Richie James to
a
keep it
third
alive.
and 9 or a third and 10,
3rd
right?
and 9 to Richie James, also to Richie James, who
Look,
was
those matter more, right? I mean, like, you can look at the stats all you want, and but when you have a low scoring tight game and you perform like that in a concise manner on a really important drive, it's one thing to like maybe you have a bunch of completions all spread out over different drives and most of your drives stink. But if you can have like a compressed 97 yards, one of the best drives of the guy's career, right? So
had to be the best, I would think. I mean, you're on the 3 yard line. The Commanders just celebrated
yep,
downing the ball there. And then all of a sudden they don't get the ball back for the rest, almost pretty much the rest of the second quarter.
8.5 minutes.
Right. And
I mean, a huge drive.
right. So the Giants going up 14-3, and in many ways the game was the game was won there because the Commanders didn't get to 14, so they had enough points to win the game right there. But that Daniel Jones played that way, and then they had Saquon Barkley right when they needed him to come through. He reels off 11, 12, 14, 3 straight runs on the drive for the last field goal that at least guaranteed him. Their 2 stars yesterday played exactly the way you want your stars to play in a big game, which is I'd love to be in Joe Shane's mind, saying, what does this mean for the future?
No doubt. And you not just play well in a big game, but like do it in big spots. Like, I mean, they needed Saquon Barkley to help. It wound up not being icing the game, but just take time off the clock at the end to move the ball and to flip the field a little bit. And he did that. They needed Daniel Jones in the first half to do something on that when they're backed up at 3 and he leads a touchdown drive. So like when your team needs you in a big game, I mean, that's to me, the marker of a reliable player. I'm not going to say Daniel Jones is a star, but like, look, I mean, they went into the halftime up 14-3. Again, they didn't score 30 points, by the way. Let's whatever the number is, go back to the story you wrote and add it. But they were up 14-3 at half. The first time, I think, in 30 games, ESPN had the stat that they led by double digits at half, and that was because of what they were able to do on that drive. They staked a big lead. And when you play these low scoring games, like the first half matters. I mean, yes, we could talk about all these second half games and all the end of the game, but like the things that happened in the second quarter of that game were important. And so certainly Daniel Jones delivered in that spot. That's a big spot to put your team
Right.
up 14-3. That was a
And
big swing. Yeah.
the biggest play of the game came right at the beginning of the second quarter because the
Right
Giants were
before it. Yep.
doing nothing on offense. Had given up big chunks of yards on the Commanders' first two drives, and the Commanders, and this came up with three points, and why they punted it from the 34-yard line, I'll never understand that. But then the entire tenor of the game changes with one play by Kayvon Thibodeau, who looked like a superstar as the fifth overall pick, what you would want. He looked exactly the part last night.
Wow. I mean,
He was,
that's wow.
that was the best way to describe what he did last night. Wow. Just everywhere.
He looks like, and Steve Politi wrote a great column on Kayvon Thibodeau for this morning. He looks like he's going to be a star. I mean, he's not going to be the defensive rookie of the year. Sauce Gardner is going to be that, obviously. But Kayvon Thibodeau delivering in a big spot. I mean, it was.
He reminded me of that guy with two initials last night. He really did.
Yeah, it's funny. I was in the hotel, a zombie this morning at being tortured by the Courtyard Bistro, waiting for what it was a pretty good breakfast. A little quinoa and a couple sunny side up eggs. With some Giants fans were hanging out there. I was, they were doing their own thing. They were feeling good about the game. Obviously, all of them looked really hungover. I looked hungover, but it's because I was, we were working all night.
You were hungover from writing.
Yeah, a typing hangover. And so Steve Serby from the New York Post, who's been covering, he knows LT as well as anyone. And so I said to him, I go, Steve or Serby, I said, KT looked like LT a little bit last night, and he nodded a little bit. He's like, oh, he's not LT yet, or was I can't remember what he said, but it was just funny that you mentioned that, because I did think about that this morning. And on that sack, I mean, it was a simple bull rush. It was all effort, because the bull rush, great play, great strength, but then to go get the ball, the presence of mind, and if you watch too on the scoop, it was so clean. You see so often a defensive guy trying to scoop the ball. These guys obviously don't handle the ball that much, and it's bobbled or whatever. But on the run, he scoops the ball and he just rolls very seamlessly into the end zone. It was such a great all effort, but like super agile play.
He seemed to do like three things in one motion.
It was right. I mean,
the sack, the pickup into the end zone. Oh,
and then
I wish I could have been on the train ride to hear what he was saying on the way.
Oh man, he is a trip.
He has so much energy after he has so much energy after they just win, and when he's the reason they won, I can't even imagine what level that goes to.
It's funny because he was gassed a little bit at the end of the game. I think he got poked in the eye, right? So he was like, he was down on his haunches or whatever. It would be crouching, I guess it would be the way. And it was funny because Julian Love joked afterwards that after the game, Thibodeau was playing up the exhaustion, and he made that reference to Paul Pierce. I think that game when Paul Pierce was sick or something like that, and
right.
The Jordan type, just carry me off, take me off, and and Thibodeau is a ham. I mean, look, I think he's obviously a super sharp guy. Let's call for what it is. The guy's got more upstairs at this time of his career than LT maybe ever did during his career. LT wasn't exactly known for making the most sound and logical decisions in his life and football life and actual life. But
yeah,
this kid is got a good head on his shoulders in terms of football savvy and awareness. They ask him to do a lot mentally on the field, and he's got charisma to him. I mean, his birthday was this week, and he kidded around with reporters and had everyone, I guess, wish him happy birthday before.
Oh yes, I refuse to sing happy birthday, but when somebody else sang happy birthday, I did at least a cha cha cha. I said, "I'm your confetti."
He's an engaging guy, and we saw it. I mean, 6-1. He wears his emotions on his sleeve, and at 6-1 in Jacksonville, he went on that F-bomb lace tirade when asked a simple question about what they showed the rest of the league. So he really, puts his personality out there. And look, sports is entertainment. This is entertainment, and this guy is highly entertaining. Not just because he's a ham of a person, but he's a tremendous player. And while we're talking about him, I mean, the strip sack was great. Was great. Honestly, though, the play at the
play
end
at
of
the goal line, because it was like
unbelievable.
the one thing I'm wondering about, what was his assignment that
He was
he
in coverage.
was? What's that?
He was in
Like
coverage on that
he
play.
he was in coverage, but there was nobody really around. But it was, like when you watch the replay, it's like, oh my god, he covered so much ground to get to beat Heineke to that spot. It was just amazing that he got there. And his quote was great about, I don't know what I was thinking. I just know we saw each other, or something like that. I do know that we saw each other.
I mean,
So,
I asked Darius Slayton about it after the game because it's always interesting to ask guys on the sideline what they thought of a play because they're like watching the whole thing, and he said something to the effect of like it was like he came out of thin air.
yeah,
Like
I mean that's what he covered that ground so fast.
remarkable play. I mean, and
Well, it was a sideline view that led to Dexter Lawrence's quote. But what were you think? What was your view of? He goes, "Well, I was on the sideline when he scored the touchdown. I was thinking, going to be a long train ride home."
that's funny. And not I don't think he let anyone sleep on that train ride. And just to reset, obviously it was 2nd and 10 from the Giants 7, or 2nd and goal, right, from the Giants 7, and Heineke scrambles to the right and Kayvon Thibodeau, I mean, that's a season-saving play. Obviously,
Yeah,
yes. We talked about they would have had to get 2. They would have had to go to overtime. So a potential season-saving play. He closes them out at the 1-yard line, and then everything downhill from there for Washington. And, obviously a tremendous all-effort play. Just remarkable. And so then the next 3 plays, really 2 of the next 3, we touched on earlier. We might as well get into it now. So 3rd and goal at the 1. That was the one where it was the penalty on Terry McLaurin for the illegal formation.
did you see the replay of that?
A couple times I watched him passing, and so the
I mean,
interesting,
McLaurin clearly looks at the side judge and says something to him.
yeah,
Yeah, I saw the McLaurin interview after the game.
yeah,
And he stopped himself and said, "I don't want to get fined here." So I mean, he was obviously upset, but he basically said, I said to him, am I good?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm good." And there was some conversation. You obviously don't know what was said, but whatever was said, and then the play was snapped, and the flag immediately went up in the air. It was
it
very
seemed like,
weird.
yeah. And the pool report from John Hussey, the referee who also addressed the play, we'll talk about in a minute. It mentioned that, and it said, there's been a conversation today and around the NFL about, like, at least on Twitter, about is the I guess the side judge and the down judge are essentially the same thing. They're just on the opposite sides of the field. Is he responding? I think that was Alan Baines, I guess, is him. And the reason I'm mentioning a name is I'll get to that in a second. But is that official responsible for telling the player, "Oh, you're on," or you need to
Right,
back off?
right,
Do they have the responsibility or the duty to help the player?
right.
It's an interesting sort of thing that it's not really in the rules, right? And
Right.
so
Did you
some
see? Did you see Hussey's response?
I did, and I need to go back and look at it right now.
The question, I got it right here. So the question was, when a player does point to the official like that,
Yeah.
does the official have to say whether he's at the line or not? And Hussey's John Hussey's answer was, the referee, not typically, and the official could be doing other things like counting the offense. There's a multitude of different duties. So I can't confirm whether the official even saw that or not, but he was clearly off the line of scrimmage, was his answer.
It's
So
it yeah. So the reason the reason I brought up the name there, um, and so you there, Bob?
yeah. I'm listening. I think I know the answer, but go ahead.
Oh, sorry. It sounded like you were.
No, I'm still here.
So so the down judge and the side judge basically the same job, and so or the whatever or is it the line judge and the down judge? Anyway, whatever it is. So there's two officials on the field that judge the line of scrimmage. One lines up on one sideline, one lines up on the other sideline. And so a Nutley native, Robin DiLorenzo, who's the third female official in NFL history, behind Sarah Thomas, and then there was another woman this year who debuted along with Robin. She's from Nutley, and we did a story on her in the spring. A really interesting story. She was on the crew, and so she worked a
Right.
game last night.
Right.
And I noticed her because Steve Politi, also very famous in the Hall of Fame, in the Nutley Hall of Fame,
Well,
uh,
I know that.
sitting next to me. And he said, "Oh, I think Robin's working this game." And so in the first half, she was on the top of the field. So she was on the I can't even remember what sideline. I think it was she was on the Giants sideline to start, right? The Giants sideline was the far sideline away from the press box, but
Right.
they switched in the second half. So she was back on the Washington sideline. So that would have been her call,
Right.
if for whatever reason she started on the opposite sideline. So
Right.
anyway, it's then so that's a weird nuance rule that like every people don't really fully grasp necessarily. I don't think how that works. And it doesn't even seem like the players kind of a
I,
misunderstanding.
I do know this from covering the game long enough, and I don't know. Um, I've seen it in training camp. Where when the teams often have officials in training camp when they're and the officials use training camp also to get ready for the season, where a receiver will say, "Hey, am I good?" And they get, "Yeah, you're good, you're good." I've
Right,
seen
right.
it.
And we're
And
there on the sideline.
I'm pretty sure I've seen it like on NFL films videos. Guys lining up. Am I
Oh,
good?
it happens all
Yeah,
the
you're
time.
good. Yeah. Oh,
Maybe it was just a miscommunication. I don't know what exactly happened, but yeah, like you mentioned at training camp, we're on the sideline. We see these interactions, um, and so then 2 plays later, so the so of course that penalty backs Washington up to third and goal at the 6. Again, pretty good position. There's an incomplete pass there, Aziz Ojolari with the pressure. Then it's fourth and goal at the 6. The ball snaps, 56 seconds left. I went and watched this replay probably 20 times last night because wound up writing about Darnay Holmes for this morning, and he was the guy in on that play, obviously. And so Curtis Samuel runs, and Curtis Samuel, remember, is the guy, the Commanders player who burned the Giants on that critical scramble play dig route that he ran to
the
on
2020.
on fourth down. Yeah, 20-yard gain on fourth down for the
Right.
90-yard touchdown drive that Washington had that wound up forcing the overtime and the tie 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Heineke had all day. I mean, he had I counted it. It was 6 seconds.
Wow.
6 seconds before from the time he caught the snap until the time he threw the ball. So it went into scramble drill mode. And so obviously everyone knows what happened. You've seen the replays. You've seen the screenshots of Darnay Holmes tracking and covering Curtis Samuel in the end zone. And I'll say a couple things about it. Obviously, it was pass interference. Like there's no doubt about it. Darnay Holmes, you watch it, he pulls down on the right arm, and then he comes over the top with his hands. But then, like when the ball arrives, he makes a play on the ball, and he makes a great play on the ball. The pass interference happened before that; it was clearly pass
He was
interference.
on his back. Yeah.
But here's my thing: if you're Darnay Holmes there, like in that situation, like the game is kind of pretty much on the line, right? So it's like it makes more sense to play that, I think, aggressively, and then leave it in the official's judgment call
Sure.
hands.
Because at worst, you're going to have a play from the one.
Or you're leaving it in someone's hands, right? Exactly. And you're right, Bob. It wouldn't, it would have been a play from the one, right? And then you take your chances. But if you play it passively, then you give them a touchdown. So
Sure. Right. Right. Right.
so
I, I did like John Hussey's quote about this too. Pass interference is a judgment call. To the officials, it didn't rise to what they felt was a restriction. Thus, they didn't call it. That's
yeah,
basically the bottom line there.
it
It's a
it
judgment call. It didn't for one season. It wasn't a judgment call, and you think that one would have been replayed and challenged?
look. I mean, it was clearly pass interference, um, but it that's not what was called, and the Giants get that enormous stop there, and then they can kneel it out after that. But obviously, the biggest moment of Darnay Holmes' career. I mean, 3 years in now, guy they drafted in the fourth round has sort of had an uneven career. Not even sort of. He's very much had an uneven career as their slot cornerback. Got burned by Devonta Smith. Uh, two
Your
weeks.
scene of Dante or Darnay Holmes in the locker room was great in your story. He just you took us into his girlfriend's living room with his baby. It was great.
It's to me, just a quick aside on this, because this guy, well, I always have to catch myself for this. He had a kid. He didn't have a kid, obviously. His girlfriend had a child, right? So,
Okay.
but so 3 weeks ago today, his daughter was born. This guy, he's never been a father before. So, okay, like anyone who's ever been a father for the first time can attest, like it is an incredibly jarring experience. So nothing can prepare you. And this guy, he is trying to you know, go through the life of being an NFL player. And I think something that, you can get some help. I'm sure he has family coming in and help, or they could hire a nanny, but it's still exhausting. Um, and so he's trying to balance that. But the NFL and the playoff push in the league like moves on. It's not going to wait around for somebody because their significant other had a child during the season. And I wrote a story 4 years ago on this, maybe, about this topic. Like when I was writing about the Jets, like how does it work for players whose wives or girlfriends have kids during the season, and do they try to like time it? I think I asked Josh McCown because he has like a billion kids. I said, "Do you ever
Right.
try to time the pregnancy so it didn't happen during?" He's like, "Oh, absolutely. Having a kid during the season is like awful. Like you need to sleep. You need to be your body. It's not like you and I who can operate on no sleep. I mean, these guys have to be physically with it. Anyway, so a really great moment for Darnay Holmes, was able to FaceTime with his girlfriend and his young daughter. And the funniest part about all that was he said, "Oh, I'm going to give them the ball." I said, "Oh, you got a game ball?" He goes, "No, I just took the ball." I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Yeah, the ball that I broke up, I picked it up and ran away with it." Well, he didn't say it like that, but that's what happened.
Right.
He's like, "I took their ball." Oh,
Right.
okay. Um,
That's funny.
so the Giants come out of there with that ball and a win and a memory of a lifetime for Darnay Holmes. Even if, again, look, a lot of times this stuff comes down to luck. I mean, were the Giants lucky that the Titans missed a field goal? Yeah, they were. Were they lucky that they didn't get pass interference called on there? Yeah, they were. But also, was that Kayvon Thibodeau play, the stop, lucky? No, it wasn't.
No, that
So
was just a good play. And
it's
and and I
no,
go back to there's no guarantee they make the 2-point conversion, and there's no guarantee they even if they do and they get the game to overtime that they win then. You know, so it was fascinating that we were that close to having another 2020 game going to overtime.
oh, it crossed all our minds. It did. I mean, it absolutely crossed all our minds. And um, the Giants locker room, like you said afterwards, there's a video that I just saw when I was looking up the pool report. I happened to stumble upon it on a Commanders reporter's uh, Twitter feed. Isaiah Hodgins has an amazing like selfie video of all the players dancing in the locker room. I'll have to go back. I have it on mute. It's incredibly loud, and Sterling Shepard is dancing so vigorously with his arms that he looks like he might throw his shoulders out. And obviously, a joyous locker room. They knew what this meant. I mean, you talk about guys. These guys try to give these robotic responses about you know one game all the same. It's not,
Yeah,
and they
no,
know it. And they know
It,
it. I mean,
it was funny how subdued Brian Dable was. I'm sure he wasn't when he was in that locker room and stuff, but how subdued he was in this post game press conference. And he said a lot of interesting things. To me, the most interesting thing he said was that 4th and 9 decision was made on Wednesday morning in his meeting with the analytics people. We said, well, if we're in that situation, we go for it. Now, a bunch of things. I think part of that was he's trying to give a shout out to some people who work really hard for the organization and don't ever get any credit. Um, but because obviously other things, wind and situation of the game go into that. But it was an interesting answer to say, hey, we had already made our decision on that 4th and 9 that we were going for it on. We talked about it on Wednesday. If we're here in this game, we're going to go for that. So,
that is
uh,
an interesting bit of insight. Yeah.
yeah. And the other thing I found interesting all season about Dable is I really do believe he's done some game management things well. And again, I forgive me for going back to Philadelphia reference here, but as great as Andy Reid was and is
Oh yeah.
his
Yeah.
his 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 albatross is always clock management, um, and challenges too were always something for him. And you know, the way Dable has set things up, he I think is very good at that kind of thing. I even love the fact that, and a lot of coaches won't do this, that he was calling a timeout on that last Commanders drive. He was
Good.
already thinking about
Yeah.
I'm leaving myself time to win this game. I love that he's so focused on those types of things. I think that's really important for a head coach, because I think so many times things like that get overlooked. Sala, I think, was talking about how, and I didn't, obviously I didn't see that game, but he was talking about how I was over aggressive with my timeouts, and I don't even know the situation, but it's when the game's moving, it's easy to sit on your couch and say, oh, you should do this, this, and this, but when the game's moving so fast and you're thinking about five different things, it's not that easy.
It's not. I mean, and Robert Saleh doesn't call plays, and Brian Dable doesn't either. But I think that's one of the big reasons why Brian Dable did not want to call plays, is so he could focus on these broader picture things. And like you said, calling the timeouts there at the end, because like the bottom line is, like, what are you going to do with those timeouts? You can't take them to overtime, right? So if they tie the game there, if you know that you got to play ahead the scenarios in your head, like, so why use those timeouts, because they're taking shots throwing the ball at the end zone, right? So
Right,
it's a
right,
matter of the downs are ticking on them, not the clock, right? On
right,
Washington in that scenario, so use your
right.
timeouts, save yourself the time, because if you do get the ball back, and if they miss a 2 point version, you get the ball back, then you just kneel it out. But if you get the ball back and it's tied, you need the time on your side more than you need the timeouts, if that makes sense, right?
Absolutely.
Anyway, but I thought good moment all around for the Giants last night, and so here they are. I mean, they're on the cusp, and just getting back to what we were talking about
Just like
earlier.
you predicted.
Yeah, just like we all predict. Oh, this is a good stat. So 22 and I crunched this for the story for tomorrow. I wrote about Adoree Jackson talking about why he thinks, kind of sort of why he thinks the Giants could make a playoff run, and he didn't say it directly, but he was on the Titans team in 2019 that made this surprising run, and he said, you never know what can happen in the playoffs, and the team has Giants have a lot of fight, and what you expect. So I looked up, obviously 22 and 59 over the last 5 years. The Giants they win out, they'll win 11 games. They may not win out, but they, they could wind up winning half as many games in one season as they did in the previous five, which
Wow.
would be a tidy little interesting stat. But in terms of what is ahead for this team, obviously Minnesota. But real quick, so who knows? Like they're going to be the 6 or 7 seed, right? And that means either they're going to play the 2 or the 3. Um, we're presuming they're making the playoffs here. They're not. If they do make it, they're the 6 or 7. So that likely will be Minnesota, which is 11-3, or San Francisco, which is 10-4. So either a shorter road trip to a cold place, or a longer road trip out west to, well, San Francisco is not super warm this time of year, but that's sort of what they're looking at. I mean, the Eagles are surely going to get the 1 seed, but that's sort of the situation the Giants are looking at. I know, people are getting excited about it, and as well they should. And so the Vikings first. How do you? We'll
Yeah.
do it
Well,
two
the
ways.
Vikings, imagine we're doing a Vikings podcast. We'd need another 16 hours to describe what they just did.
My
Uh,
God, biggest comeback in NFL history. Really good team. Justin Jefferson is insane. Kirk Cousins, not too bad either. How do you see the number one? How do you see the game going? And number two, will the Giants wind up getting all those things going in their favor and also clinching? I'm presuming
yeah,
that.
I don't think it happens this week because I don't think they go in and beat Minnesota. I think they'll play a close, tight game. Um, you know, Minnesota, as we saw, what did they end up 39 points in a half, I guess. Although I guess it went to overtime before they won. So, but 36 points and a half. Um, as we know, the Giants haven't scored that many in a long time. I forget the exact date, but 20 going back to 2020, isn't it? Against the Cowboys,
Yeah, week
30,
5,
yeah,
2020.
30, 37-34 loss, actually. You see what happens when they score 30 points, they lose. They, but I don't think they can match with the Vikings firepower, and uh, you know, uh, but I think they'll play a tight game. But in the end, we'll lose this one.
I agree. I mean, there's no point in it. I agree. I think they're going to lose, so no reason to get into all the other things that need to go their way because they're going to. I don't think they'll clinch this weekend, and they will lose. I mean, the last time they played the last time they played a team this complete was the Eagles, and the Eagles destroyed them. I mean, the Vikings and PFF are number 8 in offense, and they're number 6 in defense. And of course, by comparison, the Eagles are 2 in offense and 3 in defense. So they played a complete team a couple of games ago. They got destroyed. I don't see this going well for the Giants. Remember too, it's kind of a semi-shortish week. It's a 1:00 Eastern time, noon local time game on Saturday after the
Right.
Giants.
Well, and the Vikings, actually have the extra day to prepare because they played on Saturday this week.
The Vikings basically got a normal week, a Saturday to Saturday turnaround, and they went home, so they're staying home. So,
Right.
a lot. Yeah, I don't see this going. I don't know what I'll pick. I think I picked a score and when I sent it in earlier, but it doesn't really matter. But I don't think the Giants win the game. But so then the last one will. Do you think they'll make the playoffs?
I
Think,
do. I've already said I think that them and the Lions are going to be the two teams that
yeah, you're right.
get the 6 and 7 seeds. So I do think they'll make the play. I think they'll do it by beating the Colts next week. Well, we're 2 weeks away at this point. On New Year's Day, I think they beat the Colts. It'll be interesting to see how the Colts respond. It was interesting that the two teams that were involved in that game were the two teams the Giants are playing next, and to see how who do the Colts play this week.
Because I think I picked. It was on one of our games to pick. Or that's a good question. Who do they play?
They're playing the Chargers.
The
So
Chargers. Okay, I don't know
the
why I saw.
Chargers need to win to get in the playoffs. So it'll be, the Colts. That could be the game that just takes them out of it completely. That Vikings game. I don't know how they felt about Jeff Saturday, but if they liked him, they just didn't. They probably just cost any chance of him being their
Yeah,
coach for next season.
I mean, what a disaster. You feel bad for the players because you have an owner who's he's a whack job. Like I mean, let's be honest. I mean, everyone. What he said about Daniel Snyder was obviously admirable, but on a whole, Irsay's been prone to so many crazy decisions over his time, and yeah, no, I mean, just terrible. So yeah, I think that's likely. I think that not this weekend, but next weekend for the Giants, and you could see certainly if Seattle loses this weekend, the Commanders lose this weekend, those teams could fall off even further, even if the Giants also lose, because while the lead would stay the same, and you're ticking away at these games, and so there's fewer games for these teams to come back. And so, been a long time since we talked about playoff push around here, but appreciate everyone listening. Be sure to subscribe, rate, like us, review us on all your favorite podcasting platforms. We will be probably not talking to you guys till the beginning of certainly next week. Perhaps I would say next Tuesday, coming out of Christmas Eve. So everyone, whatever holiday you're celebrating, have a happy holiday and um, regroup, get some sleep tonight. Coming off that late night last night, later for some of us than others. Have a great week and enjoy the Giant game on Saturday. We will talk to you guys next week. Take care.
Merry Christmas.